y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo New, the podcast. I'm really excited again to be introducing Ben Page, who we have had a previous conversation with. Gosh, it probably was a little over a year ago now. Yeah, right before COVID hit. So Ben is the author of Healing Trees. He's also the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy's former director of training and also current trainer. He's also an experienced forest therapy guide. And we had this really amazing and lovely conversation with him about forest bathing. And I believe our episode was called When the Forest is Your Therapist. And honestly, it was like our best episode so far.
People loved it so much.
Yeah, and it's like it's been consistent, like even through this entire year. Like so many people are. I mean, there's something I think with the wisdom that you brought to that conversation and just the conversation we had that was just really mind blowing for us. But you know, clearly it's speaking to people on a very deep level. So we're excited to have you back.
Thank you for having me back.
So you've written this beautiful book called Healing Trees, and I couldn't help but notice that the timing of this book, you know, not that there's any like perfect time. I think every time is the perfect time to release a book like this, but I think I don't want to even say post-COVID, just like after the shutdown, I would say, having this book and reading it here in the mountains among the trees just recently, like last week, there was something about it that just really hit me in a deep, deep way. And I don't know, I feel like there's something really divine about the timing of the release of this book. So my first question for you is, what actually inspired you to write this and to release it now?
Well, part of the practical answer is just that I had time to write it. I'd been thinking about writing this book for many years, and I'd had different people approach me about writing a book about forest bathing, but pre-COVID, I was just kind of running around the world all the time and training guides and going to conferences, and I just didn't really have the mental space to be doing that creative work. I don't know about you. For me, doing creative work, I kind of need to be like in a space of nothing else going on. Like I need to be able to wake up and write for 8 hours and not think about anything else. So not having full-time employment during the pandemic was in this way quite a blessing that I had the time and the space to write it. But there was another kind of interesting thing that the pandemic brought out for me, which was in those early days of lockdown. I didn't leave my house for a long time. And I mean, I would take walks in my neighborhood, but, you know, I remember back in those days where you would realize I haven't gotten in my car all week, you know, and one of the things that kind of transformed in my perception was about, I used to go globally to nature, and then the pandemic created a hyper focus on the smallness of my own nature. And I started really coming into a more intimate relationship with my body. And that kind of set me on this journey of realizing that wherever my body is, nature is. And so it's kind of like the possibility of connecting with nature really expanded, because all of a sudden I was seeing no separation at all. That it wasn't that I had to go somewhere to experience nature. I was doing it constantly all the time. And that kind of opened up this whole new depth to my process and the work. And then when I started writing the book, one of the things that anyone that's written a book can probably empathize with is kind of this neurotic anxiety about like, are people going to love this? Are they going to hate it? Is this going to be totally ridiculous? And then I got this advice from someone that said, writing a book is basically emotional labor. And the thing about doing emotional labor is that you have to approach it from a place of extreme generosity, that if the book will help at least one person who reads it, then it was worth that time that you put into writing it. So I started just reminding myself of that every day and saying, if one person receives something from this, then it was all worth it. And that kind of gave me the serenity to just write for that one person. I kept imagining like a human somewhere, just this one human reading this book and having some kind of experience where they, were recognizing that they are nature. And then thinking about, I noticed this with forest bathing, where there's kind of a ripple effect where, a very small shift in perception can then start evolving within someone, and then that changes their relationships to the beings all around them, not only the human beings, but also the beings of the more than human world. And then it's like it just starts rippling out. So I think of it like planting seeds, that if there's a handful of people around the world that receive this and start incorporating it into their life, then that energy kind of moves into the world. And yeah, just, very humbled by the process and excited to see where it goes.
I love the format of this book. First of all, for those of you, like I just got a chance to actually hold it in my hands, and it's this really beautiful, matte, tactile, small, like very portable book. And, just seeing like the pages, it's all in green ink. And you were sharing something really beautiful with me just now, which I did not realize, but by just seeing green, that activates the healing within the body.
Right. Yeah.
Really?
Our bodies are evolved that when we see green, it activates these self-healing processes, which is part of the multi-sensory communication between nature and the human body, that it's basically saying to the body, oh, it's time to slow down. It's time to start doing this self-healing work. And it's interesting that you don't actually need it to be an actual tree. There's all this research they're doing now about like what happens if you paint someone's hospital room green, or what happens if you paint the inside of say like a jail or a prison, that it actually has this psychological effect on people where seeing green helps them calm down, helps them relax, and helps their bodies start healing. So I love that the publisher took that to heart, and all the text and all the illustrations is in this really beautiful shade of green.
It's so rad. And like, I think just holding that book too in my hands, like this is something that you want to like take out with you wherever you are, whether it's a city or rural, forest, whatever, and just have it with you. And I also found, I'm like kind of analyzing all the sort of technical details of the book, but I loved how you broke out, the whole book is about forest bathing, but you broke out the book into these different sit spot prompts. Can you describe what a sit spot is again? Because you talked about it the last year, but I just want to remind people exactly what a sit spot is.
Yeah, sit spot's like the most basic practice in forest bathing. It's basically find a place for your body to sit and just sit there. I love quoting this Spanish saying. They say, do nothing for a while and then relax. I think that really captures the ethos of sit spot. And, people sometimes think, I have to find a sit spot at the top of a mountain or, at this really perfect place. And I always tell people, if you want this to be a sustainable practice, choose a sit spot that you can walk out your front door, like a public park or your backyard. And those places are really great. And it's not stressful to get there, because sometimes people, I find they actually end up stressing themselves out trying to get to their sit spot. But the reason I included those in the book in between each chapter, and I'm hoping people will actually stop reading at the end of each chapter and go outside and do this sit spot, is that we'll probably talk about this during this interview, but language is abstract. It's pointing towards something that is not actually directly experienced. So the book is about forest bathing, but it is not forest bathing. So I would really love if people would read the book in such a way that it would actually help them gather the experience, the phenomenon of forest bathing within themselves, instead of kind of abstracting it from their own lived experience and saying, oh, well, now I know what forest bathing is, but have you lived it? Have you actually let it happen inside of you and around you? That's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
That was one of the challenges of writing the book, honestly, because it's, what good is it to understand these concepts in the abstract if you have no direct, intimate, immediate experience of it?
Yeah, it's like turning the concept into a practice of embodiment and ritual almost.
Right.
And I remember too in our first conversation, like the way that you helped us define a sit spot was so important, because like even especially for people who are stuck in the city and stuff too, and especially over COVID, that it's like you don't have to be surrounded by grass and trees to have this experience, right? Like you could go anywhere where there is a tree where you feel comfortable and just sit and become part of that nature.
Right. And then when you stretch it to its kind of logical conclusion, you could be sitting in your bedroom, and because you are nature, and when you start to see that there's no separation, like this room that we're sitting in right now is also nature. There's air, there's wall made out of wood, like all of these things come from the earth. And it's a lot like, grounding meditation is you can do it anywhere. It's just tapping into your senses and saying, what does this carpet feel like against my skin? In some ways, that's still forest bathing. If you can conceive of our material world as a unified nature instead of a divided reality where there is kind of nature and then human beings or human civilization or human whatever you want to call it. So the idea with sit spot can also be that you're connecting with the nature that you are, the body, even if you're sitting in, the middle of downtown LA. And of course there's also trees and birds and sky and all these things, but it doesn't matter where you are in some ways. I think it is supportive for people when they start to find a place that is relatively tranquil. There's an old Chinese expression that the novice meditates in the meditation hall, but the master meditates in the town square. So, you want to start somewhere that supports your process of just grounding and being here in the body. But then once you kind of start making developmental steps of incorporating this into how you see the world, you can move into more, or let's call them less traditionally thought of natural spaces and have very similar experiences. I think that's when it gets really interesting, is that when we start seeing absolutely everything, including ourselves, as an undifferentiated nature, forest bathing becomes more than a practice. It becomes kind of this perspective on reality. And I guess I should say that's really just my story with it, and that there are many ways to do forest bathing, and they're all great, and what works for one person might not work for another person, and that's okay too.
Well, you're hitting on something that I think is actually really important, and it's something that's come into my own personal practice, where I feel like so many of us are always looking outside of ourselves for the answers, or outside of ourselves for the healing. And so we end up going to, healers, therapists, whatnot, which is not bad, right? You need assistance, you need some support, and, we all do. But then sometimes I find that like the reliance on these other people, it's almost kind of like unconsciously you're kind of putting your power in these other people to derive your healing, and when the healing is really happening within you.
Right.
And it also happens on a level of like, to get a little spiritual, here for a second, I find that like, sometimes, and Sam and I have kind of like been going down this road too. We will connect to other, spiritual beings, teachers, ascended masters, loved one, whatever, and seek the answers from that connection. And also, like even grounding, it's like, I need to like connect to the earth. I need to connect, or I need to like connect to the grand central sun or whatever, and clear my energy. You can actually clear from your inside. I mean, you contain that energy within you. And so recently I've just started to like even meditate by going into my heart space and allowing my own energy and that light to actually like clear or ground. And it's something that I'm realizing, like, you know, as you're talking about nature and our connection to nature, like, yes, it's beautiful to come out into a space where you're surrounded by trees and stuff like that. Absolutely is supportive, but it's not necessary, because you are tree.
Right.
You know.
Well, this is one of the ways in which, like, I guess I'm maybe a teacher in the field of, you know, spiritual ecology or forest bathing or ecological thinking, that my whole worldview depends on a sense of non-separation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think language is one of the most crucial ways that we define our worldviews. And I notice this a lot with different things. So one of the things I notice is about this phrase, nature connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to say this is a bad phrase, but I think it does suggest a subject-object relationship, that there is something that we are connecting to or disconnecting from. Whereas the way I see it, you can't disconnect from what you are. You cannot ever be not nature, but you can obfuscate it by focusing on your ego story. You can forget that you're nature because you can abstract yourself from, you know, the material reality of what it means to be nature. And you can imagine that you are this kind of conceptual thing. Like Ellen is not a thing that you can hold in your hands. It's a story that you have and other people have about you, but it's one level of abstraction away than being part of this material reality, things that you can smell, you can touch, you can, you know, interface with through the body, through the intelligence of nature. So when we're thinking about nature connection, I think for me it helps to remember, I use the word nature relation, that's still a little touch abstracted from full identification with nature, that I am Earth, but it's closer than this idea of something we can connect and disconnect from. It's like a coming home or a remembering of what I actually am. And in that way, yes, you can do this anywhere, in any space, in any time. It's not something you have to be dependent on external factors for. You carry it within you all the time.
Can you go into the idea of abstraction a little bit more? Because you talk about this in the book, and I have a question about that as well. But yeah, if you could just kind of break it down for us a little bit, because I think this is actually a really important point, and it's something that I find myself, what's the word? It's like, I think, so full disclosure, yesterday I had a psychedelic experience, and in this psychedelic experience, I think I finally understood what an ego death actually was, or I think I fully experienced what that was. And in this period of time, it was almost kind of like my identity was being shown to me and then also obliterated at the same time. And I was holding on to things like, you know, I come from this mother, I have my brother, all these things that I identify with, and those things ended up being completely, like, just, I don't know, like literally blown to pieces.
Basically, everything that your mind is doing is working within this framework of abstraction, because it's not what is right here, right now, right in my hands, right in front of me. It is all these things that I can hold in my conscious mind and in my imagination that exist apart from the physical reality of where I am right now. So, you know, it's like, I think I talked about this in our last discussion, that you can imagine what the sound of a bell sounds like in the future, or you can remember what a bell sounded like in the past, but neither of those are real things. They're contained within layers of abstraction from your lived experience that your mind interprets and says, this is probably what it will be like. And we can do this to ourselves, that we can abstract ourselves from reality by relying on the story of who we are. The way I like to teach this in my coursework is that I say, you know, there is who you are, which is your ego story, and then there is what you are, which has nothing to do with your ego story at all. You are just an ecosystem. Most of the cells in your body are genetically coded from other beings. You have the blood that is the water and the bones that are the rocks. You have all this stuff going on that is not Ellen. It has, if you forgot who you were today, the body would still remember what it was. And so and I should say that the ego isn't bad. I think a lot of times when we get into this conversation, people talk about ego death or transcending the ego or escaping it or moving away from it. The way I like to describe this is that the ego is like a kind of a petulant child that we have. We're not born with it, right? We're born as fully embodied animals. And then along the way, we start building this ego idea, this abstraction of ourselves. And there's a reason why we do that. It's really important, actually, for us to have an ego because it's how we form relationships with the world around us. And so I'm never advocating that we destroy the ego or try to move away from it. The metaphor I like to say is, what would it be like if we put that child to bed so that we could also have time to explore what we are? If you can just let that, it's not that I want to kill the ego. I just want to say, all right, I'm just going to put you down for a nap for a while so I can spend time being what I am instead of who I am. And I think people experience this in forest bathing when they kind of have these moments of forgetting the story of who they are, because the trees don't demand that you have an identity. They don't relate to you based on your Ellenness. They relate to you based on your body. The animals, the plants, this whole thing we call nature, it recognizes you not as your ego. It recognizes you as, it's not that you're embedded, it's that you are enmeshed with the world around you. That there is not this hard boundary between you and other beings. It's constantly fluxing, intermeshing with each other. So in my teaching, I try to talk about this idea of integration, that we all come with a highly developed ego story. We all come with a highly developed abstraction of who we are, but very rarely do we spend a lot of focused attention on just being what we are and being nature. And if we spend time doing that, essentially without any effort, these two ideas, the who we are and the what we are, they tend to come together so that it creates a sensation of what we might call wholeness. So it's not that there is good and bad, it's that there are many ways of experiencing our beingness. This is kind of an ontological statement, right? That you experience yourself through the ego story, and that's not the whole. That's not the full potential or possibility of your ontological exploration of being. You can also have this other way of experiencing your reality, which is not through abstraction, but through absolute, immediate, direct experience. That you're touching, you're smelling, you're seeing, you're feeling, you're tasting. Like the immediacy of the world is what is informing your sense of relationship. And that relationship is blurring the boundary between what you think of as an abstract self and an interconnected, ecosystem that is everything.
And that is why embodiment is so important.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I'm getting it now. I just want to say this one quote that you had. Digging beneath the ego stories of who we think we are, we discover a deeper part of our identity, what we might call our ecological identity. And so it was interesting to see and hear, read what you define as ecological identity. Can you kind of go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like I'm still unpacking this and refining it, but one of the things I notice in conversation about this is that people will talk about, they'll say, my inner nature. And one of the things that I'm trying to talk about is that you don't own a private, individual inner nature. What you are is enmeshed in everything else. So your ecological identity is actually the earth. It's not that it's Ellen's nature, it is the nature.
There is not a distinction because we are all connected and we all are a part of each other.
Exactly. To use kind of a spiritual metaphor, you might consider the nature as the force or energy that is interconnecting all things. It's the thing that binds us in relationship. So it's not a private thing. I think it might be a haiku or something. It says, or no, it's a capping phrase from a Zen book. It says, in the clean mirror of sky, there is no private self. And part of the thing about the way we see the world because of our tendency for abstraction is that we really cling to a sense of having a private self, that I am me. And it's a little bit scary. This is the thing with ego death, right? This is the whole trip for people is, what if I'm not me? What if I'm not this private idea of myself? What about if what I actually am is so much larger? And you can project that on different scales. So, maybe you're the ecosystem of the territory you live in. Maybe you're the ecosystem of the continent, the ecosystem of the earth, the ecosystem of the galaxy, maybe the universe. It kind of can keep going outward and outward. But that's kind of the mind-bending thing for the exploration of what it means to be nature, is that it's not private, it's collective. It's not that I have inner nature, it's not my inner nature, it is the inner nature, and that is what makes me intermeshed in all things. This is something that will probably come up at least 2 or 3 times in this talk, but I use this phrase a lot. It's a Chinese proverb. It says, tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. I like to edit it a little and say relaxation is what you are. And so this idea that tension is who you think you should be really characterizes our ego consciousness, because the ego wants to be better than it is all the time. This is why we fall prey to our own self-criticism so often, because the ego is never satisfied with who we are. So it creates this tension that, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough, I'm whatever. And then the interesting thing about this kind of spiritual practice of relaxation or nature relation, the embodiment of what we are, is you don't have to do anything. That's kind of the amazing part of it, is you don't need to earn being what you are. There's no spiritual mountain to climb. There's no practice that you have to spend 10,000 hours doing. It doesn't matter who you are in your story. That only exists in that abstract reality that we can create with the mind. You are effortlessly all the time Earth. And that's kind of the thing that for me feels extremely hopeful. That even though we live in a world where there are challenges and suffering, and of course, I'm not going to be around forever. You're not going to be around forever. None of these beings will be around forever, not even this planet. So it's really this grappling with understanding that even when this body is gone, I'm still Earth. The identity that I have, the ecological identity, never ceases. The story of Ben will last as long as people remember it. And that might, maybe a few people after I die will remember me, and that story will probably evolve and transform after I'm not here. But eventually that story will be forgotten. But meanwhile, I'm stones, I'm rivers, I'm trees, I'm birds. The what I am is a constantly evolving, fluxing, organic, natural process that I don't have to be special for. And so I don't need to have this egoic striving to become someone worthy. I'm just being what I am. This relaxation is just being what you are. I think that feels really hopeful. There's nothing you have to do. There's no way you can screw it up. And that's, I think, what people talk about when they say the unconditional love of the earth. I think that's what we're really talking about, is you're never going to not be Earth. Your ecological identity is not about who you are. It's a guaranteed constant that you're always enmeshed in this physically. Whatever you're thinking about, well, that's just all up here. But the real reality is that the Earth loves you in such a way that it will never let you go or the universe, whatever it is, whatever scale of the material reality you want to define this as, you're always going to be here. Even if this species is no longer here, even if civilization collapses, there's nothing that can take that away from you. And I guess I should say there's nothing that could take that away from us collectively.
Yeah, it's almost like the idea that you just change forms over time and you
Yes.
just evolve with the universe as the universe evolves, but it's not that you disappear. You just are a different form later.
Right. And I think a lot of our kind of worldviews are based on a preference for ideas of transcendence. We have a lot of philosophical and spiritual systems that suggest that there is kind of an upper world and a lower world, or like a spiritual reality that is on top of a material reality. There's this
And that it's
interest,
separate somehow.
right, that these are separate.
And one's better than the other.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
When in reality, maybe these things are intermeshed. So there's this interesting story about when Buddhism is migrating from India into China and they meet the kind of early Taoist sages. And like many Western ideas, Buddhism is based on kind of a negative view of the material world. It says, this is a place of suffering. You will continue to stay here until you can figure out how to transcend this place and escape it and get out. And when they met the Taoist sages were very puzzled by this because they said, nature is fundamentally good and that this material world is the only world. Why would you ever want to leave? This is the beauty of our reality, which is why Taoist sages live to be, 150 years old, because they don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah.
This is the place to be. And also that you're never not going to be here. This is literally, I don't like to say it's home anymore because it's you.
Yeah.
I learned this thing the other day that was really interesting. The word ecology comes from the Greek oikos, which means home. And again, this thing about language creating our perception. When we think of nature, ecology, as a home, that creates the idea that we're separate because we're embedded in the home. The home is the setting for our story. So now I need to find a new word instead of ecology to describe this, because it's not that this is the setting or the home, it's that this is you.
Yeah. As you were talking, I think something finally clicked for me that never clicked in this way before, where when we're talking about meaning and what we quote unquote leave behind, so many of us are wrapped up in our work and our legacy, this word legacy of, my accomplishments or my actions living onwards, after I'm physically, transitioned or whatever. And the way you are kind of talking about us being the earth, us being nature, that we don't have to do anything to earn this, that we just simply are, and that we will be as long lasting as the earth because, this is just inherently who we are. So there's nothing that we have to create. It's just making me realize I've been so focused, even in the spiritual practice, on helping people heal, helping people expand, right?
Which is to say, helping people change from what they are now to something different.
Right, exactly. Right. And it's not. It's just, if anything, you're right, it's a remembering. It's a remembering of our inherent, it's not connection, but our inherent relationship of our inherent oneness, I guess, with everything around us.
It's like our universality.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with our work. Even the spiritual work has nothing to do with that at all.
Well, have you ever heard of this term spiritual narcissism?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like the ego is such a sophisticated thing that it can co-opt almost all of our experiences into being about it. So spiritual narcissism is when people like being spiritual because they like how other people look at them and think, oh, she's so spiritual. And so it's not about actually having a genuine spiritual experience, but it's the ego boost we get from people perceiving us as spiritual. And that leads into all sort of performance, because then it's not about, having a legitimate spiritual experience, if that can be described, but about, showing people how amazing you are.
Totally.
And I think about this with trees. It's like, are they striving? Like, are they worried about what they're leaving behind?
Yeah.
Are they concerned about these things? And I think really at the fundamental bottom of the ocean, the bottom of the well of our psyche, this is really about grappling with death. Because we don't like the idea that the ego is going to go away.
Right.
Or let me rephrase that. The ego doesn't like that it's going to go away.
Yeah. The impermanence of
It's
it.
like when people are transitioning, the ego finally gives up and the body knows how to die. The body isn't worried. It just knows what it's doing because it's done it so many times already. But the ego is not ancient like the body. The ego is just, as old as you are.
Right.
So it's like a child, right? And it's terrified and it doesn't want to go away. So it does everything in its power to create a permanence. And we do that by doing things that we think will be celebrated by other people for the rest of time. But that's just, it's not essential for, what I'm saying is the earth will remember you and you are the earth. You don't need to do anything to have that. But a lot of spiritual practice is also about striving.
Yep.
This is where we get into a layer of paradox in a lot of Eastern traditions, because the more you strive, the farther you get, right?
Right, exactly.
But a lot of people put, say, enlightenment or some sort of spiritual achievement on a pedestal, and they say, I want to get to there. And then you never get there because you just want it so much that you're not doing it for the right reason anymore. You're clouded by the desire to achieve it instead of the actual embodiment of what it is.
Yes. And it's so interesting the way that you phrase that actually too, because it's like, then it becomes something outside of you,
Right, exactly.
something to attain rather than just something you are.
Right. And that's why I say tension is who you think you should be, right? This applies to spiritual practice as well. People have all this tension of, oh, I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not good enough yet. And it's like, if we could take this lesson from the earth about what it means to just be what you are, then maybe you wouldn't have this idea that you should be someone else or something else. You'd see the incredible, dynamic complexity and beauty of what you are right here, right now, and that reality extends far beyond your own body. I mean, it's like there's that study about awe where the astronauts looked at the earth and they described the feeling of awe. And I wonder if people could do that with their own body.
Yeah.
Can you look in the mirror and recognize how unbelievable this is?
Yeah.
Can you look out your window and recognize how unbelievable it is? There's this meditation teacher he has this thing about seeing the world as rainbows, where he says, the reason why we stop and look at a rainbow is not only because it's beautiful, but also because we know it's impermanent. We know we have to stop and pay attention to it because in a minute it might not be there anymore. So what would it be like to look at your hands like rainbow hands? What would it be like to look at the trees like rainbow trees? And I'm not saying colorful. I'm saying seeing the ephemeral beauty of what is right in front of you. Because we tend to think that it's, we're so attached to the idea of permanence, which is why we struggle with our own impermanence, that we just say, oh, it's just going to be there later. It's never going to be like that ever again.
Exactly.
Every single tree, every single river, you never step in the same river twice. It's all constantly moving and changing and evolving, and so are you. And that's the thing that gets me excited about forest bathing is, it's limitless. There's no bottom of the well. You're always seeing the world newly. You're seeing this rainbow world.
I think that's also why seasons, honestly, are so important to experience. Adam, my partner, used to get really pissed at me because we would always go on hikes and I would want to stop and take pictures of all the trees and all the flowers, and I think I never thought about it in that way, in the way of impermanence, but I think subconsciously that's why.
Right,
Because
you're holding on.
I'm holding on to this one moment, knowing that I can go on this hike a bazillion times.
You'll never see that flower.
I will never see it that way ever again,
Right.
you know, and in this light and in this, you know, this particular day and, you know, meteoric kind of conditions or whatever, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And it's that appreciation. Thank you for that. That actually is like, that's hitting me in a very, very deep place.
I literally went on a couple hikes where it was like I stopped and smelled every plant, every single plant, like even the ones without flowers. I was like, these all have such unique smells. And at one point my face was like buried in the dirt by my feet as I was like smelling this mossy magical thing, and like all these people were passing. My boyfriend was like, don't worry about us.
She's okay. She's okay.
Yeah. He was like, she didn't fall.
Well, you know that thing, the TLDR is too long, didn't read. So I often will joke with people that the TLDR of my book is go outside, don't forget to smell things.
Yeah.
I guess I should say, go outside, pay attention, don't forget to smell things.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't read my book and you listen to this podcast and you want to do some forest bathing, just try that. Yeah, go on a walk, pay attention, smell things.
Yeah.
It gets you right into this moment, right? Because the sensing body is the gateway to immediacy. It's interesting, too, that like our brains are receiving sensory data from our bodies, but the electrical energy moving, say, from the skin where I'm touching this carpet up to my brain, it takes time. It's not a lot of time. It's like a microsecond, but there is a delay from sensation to abstract recognition. And so it's interesting that the body is really experiencing the closest thing we have to what we call reality.
That's so
the
true.
brain is kind of watching a movie that's a microsecond behind the body. So it's like, if you really want to practice being here, you have to learn how to let go of the analysis and the abstraction and the evaluation and the judgment, the attachment, the story. It's not about any of that stuff. It's purely the sensory experience of being in that moment where you're smelling that flower, and it doesn't need to be profound. I think that's where sometimes people get a little tripped up, is it's like, it has to have this this story that's where the ego can kind of co-opt those experiences, right? It's like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to have this experience? And it's like, it doesn't need to have an abstract meaning. The beauty is in the direct experience of this phenomenon. That's where it's all at. Once you get into the thinking, you've stopped actually smelling.
Yeah.
But it's amazing that basically our brain-body connection is very highly evolved. Like, as animals, we lived most of our evolutionary history outside. We needed that. We're not really evolved to live inside buildings like we do today. You really needed to have a very sharp connection between the brain and the body. But now, because we spend most of our time thinking about stuff, we spend most of our time in this world of abstraction, our brain, because the way the brain is made, it's trying to conserve energy. It's really sophisticated. It's incredible. And one of the ways that the brain does this is by trimming away information, data that it doesn't think you need to see or recognize. So if you're walking down a trail and you're, say, talking on your phone, or you're chatting with a friend, or you're thinking about work, what's happening is your brain is screening the vast majority of the sensory information that's coming into the body. The body always is receiving it. It always is receiving it, but you don't feel it, you don't see it, you don't hear it, because the brain is just screening it out. The brain says, Ellen doesn't need to see the intricate details of this bark. She doesn't need to hear this very quiet bird song, because why would she? It's irrelevant. So we actually need to have a focus on our attention to reclaim that ability to be connected to the material world, what we call nature, because the brain has figured out that basically today, for our survival, we don't really need a lot of that anymore. And that's kind of the weird danger of modernity, you can say. It's like, as we become more separated from the evolutionary mechanisms that kept us alive because of our society and our technology, we are losing something of what we are. We're losing access to this very primal, what I call the ecological identity. And you could also describe that identity as a sense of authenticity. I think that's something that's really interesting, where people have this authenticity within the ego story is interesting, because as an abstract idea, benness has a fixed character. And so when we think about authenticity, we're basically talking about conformity to the imagined idea of myself. And so authenticity precludes us from growth and change. And it's like, if we look at nature, you see a forest fire come, it's completely different. The entire ecosystem has completely changed. Is it authentic still because it's not what it was yesterday? No, because the ecological authenticity is not tied to a fixed idea, an imagined abstraction of who I am. It's this incredibly dynamic, fluxing system that I can be different constantly. And that authenticity is hard for people to really get it. How can I be authentic if I'm always changing? Oh, that's what nature is.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This is really reminding me of a conversation I had over the weekend with a friend who was talking about, I think she actually used the words, if the birds know something is coming, they fly to the mountains, they fly to the hills, they don't stop and they think about, oh, but what about my car, my house, my things, my blah, blah, blah. It's like there's this primal connection to the world around them, in that they know what is coming before it's coming. They can read the signs. They're in the flow of this energy, but then also without analyzing what that means, they're able to respond to it in a way that is beneficial to them physically, and like allows them to continue on after whatever it is that's coming out of the ocean comes. Or, and it's like that's where we get so stuck in our own way, and then it's like we're really surprised when a hurricane hits.
Right, we're not very good at listening to the intelligence of our bodies, which is what connects us to the world.
You have a beautiful quote here: forest bathing redirects our attention away from our thoughts and towards the sensations of the body, a process which in turn slows down the mind by decreasing rumination and providing mental space to relax and restore. Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, it's almost kind of like the word clothes came to mind, and I almost feel like as soon as humans donned clothes, that is where the separation began, because no longer do we have these senses, like this connection to the air, to the body. Like now there's this sort of like curtain between us and, and sensing, really, But man, yeah, I'm loving this conversation. I knew we were going to go deep. I just I'm like, let's go. Dive in.
Let's just dive in. Yeah. Well, the sense of separation is, in some ways, it's biological at the lowest level. Like, this is a story from the world of science that apparently there was a time on this planet in its evolutionary history where all organisms derived their energy from photosynthesis, that nothing ate anything else. Everything just got energy from the sun. And then one day, and this is such a weird thing to think about, one day, a cellular organism figured out that it's more energy efficient to eat another cell and capture its energy instead of relying on photosynthesis.
Isn't this where bacteria come in,
Yes.
essentially?
And so essentially, from a biological standpoint, everything instantaneously recognized separation because it was necessitated by being hunted and hunting. That all of a sudden, I couldn't trust the beings around me, so I had to develop a subjective sense of self. I had to, and this is the most basic, rudimentary idea of separateness, right? That there are things that are not me. And then you build evolutionarily through time a deeper and deeper sense of separation. But I think at this point in our history, humans have a very particular idea about their separateness, which is kind of, I mean, I don't know where it comes from at the very beginning, but I think part of it is that fear of death that like really galvanizes philosophy and spiritual practice and all these things to try to answer this question of like, I feel uncomfortable that I'm impermanent. I don't like this. And so I have to figure this out. And then we can do all of these kind of abstract things with our imaginations and our mind to try to explain away the inevitability of our impermanence. You know, this is where the separation gets kind of like rooted in. And so you see things like the development of the idea of a soul, for instance.
I was
This
just
is
going
an
to ask about
amazing
that.
idea. This is it's a powerful idea. It's something really powerful that there is a permanent thing that I carry with me that cannot ever be destroyed. And when we do that, we're kind of also saying there is a part of me that is separate from the earth. Because if we're thinking ecologically, everything that you are is borrowed from the earth, and everything that you are will be returned to the earth. That's reciprocity, right? That's how it all works. But then the creation of the idea of a soul or a spirit, it's like saying, there's this tiny part of me that I'm not going to give you. Like I can't give you all of me. And so I need to keep something separate. I need there to be something, and it's often contextualized personally. It's my soul. When I was born, it was given to me, or I created it. It happened, you know? So then we have all of these rhetorical tools to convince ourselves of our separation, because they often are good coping mechanisms for the inevitability of death. There's also all these ways that, you know, the development of religious ideas in our shared global history have contributed to this, where I was telling you this earlier about the phrase Mother Earth. So, and I'm not trying to say this is a bad phrase. Like, I think there's many different ways of seeing reality, and I'm not trying to suggest that mine is the right way. This is just my story. So the way I hear Mother Earth is to say, I'm separate from my mother. Freud talked about this when he talked about the ego development, that one of the reasons why infants develop, or, you know, young children develop that ego is because they psychologically need to separate themselves from the body of the mother. Because when you're born, the way you're perceiving reality is basically that I am body of mother, and everything is just body of mother. And then slowly you need to define yourself, you need to push the body away. And Freud's analysis is that, you know, it's the disgusting body of the mother, that I have to get away from that carnal reality that I was inside of this person and I was grown inside of her. And that's the horrific, disturbing thing for Freud. That was how he analyzed it. For me, I think there's something we're doing with the earth when we talk about Mother Earth, where we're saying, I'm not you anymore. I'm individuating from you. Because you can't be your own mother. You can't give birth to yourself. Like, in many spiritual traditions, like, not even gods can give birth to themselves, right? It's like, you cannot be your own mother. So when we use language like Mother Earth, we're also creating a layer of abstraction by using that archetype of mother, because what I'm saying is the earth is not your mother. The earth is you. It's you. That's the hard thing for people to grapple with, is it's not the setting.
Right.
It's not the place that I am embedded. It's not the source from which I come. It's not the thing that gives me my private self. There's no separation. It's you. You are it.
As you're talking, it's making me realize or think that this is the reason why the lack of self-love that we have for ourselves is reflected in the earth.
Yes.
Because we are one and the same.
Right.
Right? There was a moment, I'm going to just tell all my psychedelic stories today. There was a moment during a cannabis trip, actually, where the idea of like, my soul is just one tiny little drop in the soul of the universe, that idea kind of came through. And then I suddenly started thinking, what if Adam and I were the same person? What if his soul and my soul were part of the same being? What if everyone that I am in contact with, all my friends, my family, blah, 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 we are all literally the same person. We are derived from the same source. We are, and it was like sort of a moment of realization that, like, I don't think I quite, like, you hear, we are all connected, we are all one, all that kind of shit all the time.
Right. What does that shit mean?
What does that mean, And then to get that idea, I was like, oh, damn. My partner and I are this, it's like we are the same. There's not really a separation of our souls because we all go into the same river of the universe, the same river of the soul of the universe.
Right.
It's fascinating to be able to kind of like understand that. Yeah.
I mean, I think part of this also speaks to like our tendency for objectification. And when I use that word, I don't mean turning people into objects in like when we talk about the objectification of women, it's like seeing women as an object, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this other way we can use the word objectification, and it's not about turning people into objects. It's about the relationship between subjects and objects. That, this is a grammatical use of the word. In grammar, there's usually a subject and there's an object, and the subject acts upon the object. The object is passive. It doesn't have agency. So when we kind of look at this, you start to say, well, the first step is to realize that we're actually living in a like interconnected field of subjectivities, that we're acting upon each other, right? So that's the first step. And then once you get there, there's kind of another step you can take to saying, wait a second, is there any separation at all? Or is subjectivity actually kind of an illusion unto itself? That it's not that there are discrete individuals acting upon each other. There is just an ecological unity that is acting upon itself. And that, I mean, I understand why people feel uncomfortable with this idea, because it really subverts the idea of our individuality and free will.
Very Western kind of like,
And that's scary for people because they want to feel in control. When we relax into at least allowing for the possibility that we are not in control, we can start to experience ourselves outside of the binary of subject and object. And we can start feeling that it's all happening through just this one system. Another way of saying this is that the earth has its own sentience, or you could say the universe has its own sentience, that it is a system that is governed by a prime directive. In Taoism, they call this the Tao. It's the thing that makes all the things happen, right? And we like to think that we are in control and that we're the deciders. We are the subjects. We're the main characters in the story. And not only that, we're the heroes of the story. I think in some ways, even though I appreciate Joseph Campbell's work a lot, the imprint of his philosophy upon our culture is very problematic in a way, because it sets us up for an idea of striving.
Hero's journey.
We need to kill the dragon, we need to climb the holy mountain, we need to earn our place, we need to go on this sacred adventure. What about if none of that was real? What about if the earth is on its own adventure and we're part of that? We're not subjects, and in some ways we're not objects either. We're kind of participating effortlessly in what the earth is trying to achieve. And this is where we get into the challenging conversation about environmentalism, of course. And again, multiple truths can coexist in this space. I'm certainly not suggesting that this is the way, but it's a perspective on what's happening. And I often question about, is environmentalism framed by an anthropocentric bias? Are we talking about what is good for the earth? Are we talking about what is necessary for us to survive as a species on the earth? Because for me, I think about our species has been here 200,000 years. The longest ice age was 300 million years. Life keeps happening. That we think that we're needed to make sure that it keeps going is so filled with hubris, such arrogance on our part, that it's like, the hopefulness is in what I was saying, that you're always part of this. You don't need to worry about, that you're going to disappear. Just the story goes away, but physically you're always here. But that might be, you might take a 300 million year break as being basically a bunch of ice, you know?
Right.
And that's okay. That's not an ecological failure. That's the organic unfolding reality of what the Earth's story is. And I often wonder about, you know, how can we think about that hero's journey from the perspective of the Earth? Because it doesn't seem like it has a logical conclusion. Like, the Earth isn't trying to achieve anything. It's not trying to get it right. It's not trying to create a perfect version of itself. And like you were saying, that applies to the reflection in ourselves, that we're always trying to become the perfect version of ourselves, as if that's possible. But every time we get where we want to be, then we abstract it one layer further, and then we have another mountain to climb. It's like climbing a mountain range. You know, you think you've gotten to the tallest mountain, and then, oh fuck, okay, now there's an even taller mountain behind that. But the journey never ends. But the Earth, it has this timelessness to it. And of course that timelessness is bounded in reality. The Earth wasn't here at the beginning, and it won't be here at the end, and that's okay. But the consciousness, you could say, of the planet isn't preferencing one kind of ecological reality. It's not saying, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. So when we talk about our relationship to the Earth, we struggle to really feel that we can kind of allow for whatever is going to happen, and to understand the nature of what love actually means. This is where I get into this thing that I think people really have a rough time with. Because it's like, I ask people, you know, if you've ever had a friend or a family member who gets really sick and they die, do you stop loving them along the way? Because you're uncomfortable that they're going through that, you know? And most people say, no, that who would do that? That would be awful. So why do we have that feeling about the Earth? Like, I know people, like here in California, we have this wildfire situation, which is devastating, and yet is also part of this ecosystem. And so people have a really hard time going to those places that they loved. They had a relationship with that place in a specific way, in a specific configuration of that reality. They felt attached there. And then it goes into a different state. And then it's like, do I still love you? Can I still love you? And then extrapolating that onto a planetary scale. It's like, for me, one of the spiritual like practices that I really feel like I'm cultivating through my life is trying to say to the Earth, I'm going to love you unconditionally. Even if it's 120 degrees, even when there's smoke in the air, even when there's rising oceans and species are going away, and love and grief are not mutually exclusive by any means. It doesn't mean that I don't have the tears and the grief, but it also doesn't mean that I'm rejecting what is happening and saying, no, Earth, you are not allowed to do this. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to save you. I'm going to control you. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to prevent you from becoming what's next. And that, again, is our fear of death and the fear of our species, civilization, and individual permanence or impermanence.
And this need to fix.
Right.
This need to fix everything around us. And that gets back into the whole, you know, spiritual realm too, where it's just, who are we to say, you have a problem, let me come. I mean, this is where my whole decolonization issue or work has been coming through. It's never on any of us to say anyone has an issue or a problem to fix.
Right.
You know, it's up to each individual, each being, each everything to... This is where I love the trees as teachers, because
they're excellent teachers.
They're amazing teachers. Like, if a tree falls, you don't see a bunch of trees pulling that tree back up, you know? They witness. They hold space.
Yeah.
And I think Sam and I have had a recent conversation about just that, like the power of just holding space, being still, witnessing somebody else's experience, and not trying to do anything about it. And it's not callous or cold.
Right.
It's actually probably the biggest act of love to just witness.
Right.
Just honoring And
Yeah.
it's so interesting too. I love the way that this conversation is sort of framing that perspective of wholeness and evolution that's just totally natural to the universe, because it's like I feel like, especially coming out of COVID, we hear things so often that are like, oh, Mother Nature is pissed, she's pushing back, she's, you know, blah blah blah. And it's like, we're giving her, not only are we giving the earth this sort of sentient personality, but we're like making it a spiteful personality, and that's
Right.
very like egoic thing of us to do,
Right. Right. Yeah.
rather than sort of like looking inward to see, you know, how the ways in which we're actually connected, and the ways in which we can actually start to shift our own lives and our own relationship to that.
Right. Well, this is again that mirroring of the inner and outer world, that it's like we have a hard time unconditionally loving the earth because we have a hard time unconditionally loving what we are. Like,
Right.
and again, what we are is this body. So we have a fraught relationship with our own beingness, that we don't like getting older, and we don't like getting sick, and we don't like dying for sure. You know, we don't like being nature, basically. So we're spiteful about what we are.
Yeah.
And then we can very easily project that onto the character we give to the earth, that, yeah, she's angry.
Yeah.
An easier way of thinking about it, well, I don't know if it's easier. Another way of thinking about it is that there is a drive towards harmony, which is inherently compassionate, because it's not preferencing any particular beings, it's preferencing the whole. So, you know, ecologically, we can see the drive towards balance, where when there's too many things, you know, there's an overpopulation in a species, it naturally corrects itself, because if it's wolves, let's say, they eat too many deer, there's not enough deer, too many wolves, the wolves don't have enough deer to eat, their population decreases. It just naturally happens. But because we don't fit ourselves into an ecological framework, we think we are separate, so there are different rules that apply to us. We think we can get out of it. And that's the hubris. So when we think about the earth being angry at us, it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's about everything.
Yeah. And this is where our technology comes in to try to save the day and fix all the things that essentially the imbalances that we've created, right?
I have a question about, like, because this whole concept is making me think a lot about, like, even in this idea in meditation and spirituality, where it's like, I remember hearing, especially when I was first learning how to meditate, so often it was like, oh, you'll get to a place where you realize you are not your body. And there's like inherent detachment from it. And it's like there's this permanence of this thing that exists over here, and that it's almost like your body is, it's like a ship you've temporarily boarded, and you're going to discard it. So it's like this, it's like a secondary layer of pulling away from that.
Yeah, that makes me feel sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I find that really difficult to reconcile, because, you know, in so many spiritual practices, they talk about, just as you noted, like this concept of the soul and this permanent thing. Yet, even then, when you go back into Buddhism, it's like every living thing is so revered and so respected in its own way. And it's like, I'm having all these thoughts where I'm like, wow, there are so many dissonant messages here.
Yes.
The whole notion of we're only spiritual beings in a human body, even that idea, I feel
Yeah.
like, is this separation that, you know, somehow one's superior to the other.
Right. Well, it's
You
this
know?
preference for transcendence
Yeah.
over earthliness.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that the ego really enjoys what I describe as a vertical axis of conscious experience. The ego really likes depth and height experiences. It likes feeling itself explore the depth and the height of what it can become. But there's kind of a fixed limit on either end of that. And then you know, the ego goes away, basically. You can go so deep or so high that you lose that. But then if you imagine like a horizontal axis that spreads infinitely in other directions, I think it's like that's the way we're connecting or remembering or relating to nature. Is it's not about having transcendent experiences or depth experiences. It's about enmeshing ourselves in everything that is around us. That's a different kind of, you could call it a sacred geometry, I guess. You know, a different way of conceptualizing what it means to be spiritual. Instead of trying to transcend or go deep, it's like everything that is around me, I don't need to go anywhere. I need to interconnect myself with all of these things around me. That's where the spiritual practice resides.
Yeah.
Because, this thing about transcendence makes a lot of sense for the ego, because it's like it's trying to get to the apotheosis of itself. It's trying to become the ultimate me. And that's just like, you never get there. That's the reason why I describe this kind of spiritual narcissism thing as like a hamster wheel. People think they're climbing a ladder.
Yeah.
Every year, every session or whatever, they're getting closer to where they want to be. But more often than not, I think it's like a hamster wheel where you've created a system where the teacher has said to you, you know, I can give you this thing. And you say, tell me what I need to do to earn this thing. And he says, do this thing. And you do it. And he says, now do this thing. And then you do that thing. Okay, now do this thing. And this is the way that materialism in spiritual practice and spiritual culture is a really dangerous thing, because it creates an economy of spirituality where you are promised something that cannot be given to you.
Yeah.
And then you work and work and work under the premise that you're going to earn it, but you never get it.
Yeah.
So what would it be like if we just let go of that?
Yeah.
What would it be like if we just said no to that idea and instead relaxed into being what we are, that there's nothing you do to earn it. It's just spending time inside of the body, inside of what we are. Then maybe we have a completely different view of everything.
I think this is hitting on why I have had such a difficult time with this concept of ascension that is espoused by the greater spiritual community, because it feels like this idea of leveling up.
Yes.
It feels very much like the career escalator that I was on.
Right.
It's a different wrapper.
It's like how apps get you. Like I have this walking app on my phone that tells me how many steps I've taken.
Yeah.
And there's a gamification to it where it's
Totally.
like, oh, if you take another 3,000 steps, you're going to reach this benchmark.
Yeah.
And there's something psychological about that where you see that and you're like,
It feeds
oh,
the
I
ego.
want that. I want that.
Totally.
You know? Yeah. Oh, that would be
It's
so
crack.
cool. Yeah. And then I can show all my friends. It's like, look how many steps I did today. But yeah, like people understand how human psychology works.
Yeah.
Like marketing has already laid the groundwork for this. And so it's not just about economics. It's also like we can apply marketing to anything. You know, how do you get someone to want something?
Yeah.
And part of that is kind of dangling something that they can't have or something that's hard to get, and saying here, and then you get to that thing and now, oh, there's another thing dangling even higher. It never stops.
Yeah.
You know?
Agreed.
So then you never feel that you have achieved what you set out to do. That's the great tragedy, is it's like, I thought I was climbing a ladder. I've been running on this hamster wheel for 50 years, whatever. And I should say, I was on that hamster wheel. Like, this is not a judgment about people that are having that experience, because I know that experience. And I can honestly say that experience probably got me to the place where I was ready to get off the hamster wheel. So sometimes, you know, this is that whole thing about polarity, is like, opposites are necessarily married and connected to each other. You can't have one without the other. So for me, it was like I needed that experience to understand that it wasn't going well.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't want to discourage anyone from, like, you need to be where you need to be. You need to be in your process as is appropriate for where you're at in your process.
Right.
And like this thing with nature connection, you know, for a while I was in that too. Like, I want to connect to nature. I want to learn how to connect to nature. And that got me to the place where it was like, wait a second, I am nature. Why am I trying so hard? Why am I going to all these retreats? Why am I doing all this stuff?
Yes.
This is kind of why I hope this book and my next book and whatever, my course and stuff, is kind of, the end game for me is to teach myself out of a job. Like, I think part of the whole economy of, like, you know, writers or gurus or whatever is like, I gotta hook you. I got to get you in on this idea, and then you need the next thing to keep going.
Right.
And just like where we started this conversation with SitSpot, it's like, if you read my book and then throw it in the garbage, but you go to SitSpot, like that's better than trying to figure this all out. Like then you'll be on your path, and nature is going to do a better job mentoring you because it's real. Like the book is separated from reality by one layer of abstraction, by my bias, by my ego, by my language. I'm trying to point you to something, but I can't actually get you there.
Right.
So I depend on the people who take up the work to have their own process. And I can't really, once I open the door for you, I can't really help you very much after that. That depends on the extent of kind of time and attention you're willing to put into doing things like sitting with trees. And then I think it all just unfolds. Like that's what happened with me, at least, is it didn't come on because someone explained it to me. I don't know if it would have worked that way. I just had to keep paying attention to what was happening in the world, and this is just what came.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your course.
Yeah, my course, it kind of draws on what I was talking about before about integration of the ego story and the inner nature. So the metaphor that I like to use is when you're born, you might imagine yourself as an ecosystem. Maybe it's a forest or a meadow or a mountain or something. You know, it's a big, vast space. And then somewhere in your early childhood development, and again, this is totally natural and normal, you develop this ego. And the thing about the ego development is that it demands a sense of subjectivity. And so the metaphor I use is when you're building this, it's like you're building this fortress on one part of that land. You were born as the whole continent, let's say, and now you're building a fortress in just this 1 square mile, you know? So now you've created this separation between yourself and the interconnectedness that you were born with, but you need it in a way because we need to have a sense of separateness. Like I can't be sitting here talking to you if I don't know I'm separate from you. It's functional. It's very useful to have this. But like I was saying, it's not all that exists. So I think people tend to lock themselves in this fortress. They don't realize they're doing it, but they lock all the doors. And my course basically looks at 6 doors. And the idea is what happens when you let nature come in, and what happens when you let the inner nature come out. So the process is working through, the way I think of it is people come with a very strongly developed thesis statement, which is the ego. What my course offers you is the antithesis statement. So most people come and they say, I know who I am. And I say, okay, great. Now I want to talk to you about what you are. And we work through these different chapters that address purposelessness, unconditional acceptance, spiritual narcissism, embracing the mystery of things, the fallacy of rationality, the centrality of the body, all these different ideas. The other one is playfulness, innocence, and simplicity, which I think is wonderful. I love teaching that one. But what I'm trying to get people to do is say, it's not that I'm one or the other, it's the arc of the journey is about synthesis. So we have our thesis statement and our antithesis statement. How do I come to a point of integration? How do I understand that these things are connected? And that these things are not mutually exclusive ideas. I'm not either me or nature. I can actually be both. And the technique that I'm using in this course, which I really love, is there's kind of modules each week. So this is remote learning. So people receive audio meditations and readings that I put together and all this stuff. And then once a week, we come into a Zoom call. And this technique is called weaving. So what I do is I have each person share a story about their experience, and I invite people to listen to these stories for what is evocative, what makes you feel something. And I just ask people to journal those words or phrases as they listen to all of the stories. And then we stop for 5 minutes and I say, okay, now I want you to weave all of these pieces together. And it creates, I like to think of them as poems. But you could also think of it as a story. And it's a story that is told from an intersubjective perspective, because it's not framed by your own story anymore. Now you're weaving all these stories together in such a way that you're pushing the story beyond your ego. You're not in control anymore. You're not choosing the words that make the story. You're leaning on the experience of harvesting what is evocative for you from other people. And what's kind of cool is, like, in the current cohort I'm teaching, we have people in Ecuador, Chile, the UK, Canada, Costa Rica. So the ecosystems of those places come into the stories that are shared in that Zoom call. So cool. And so we're weaving different stories from different parts of the world through the lens of this intersubjective story. Wow. And I like to tell people, we're here to tell a story that's never been told and will never be told ever again. This is a story about the inner nature. And it's kind of a cool journey getting people to work through the cognitive dissonance of what does it mean to identify as Earth? Because a lot of people come into it and they're like, well, I think I love nature, but I don't know if I am nature. Because then, there's still these layers of separation to peel back. Right. It's like, if you're still existing in that subject-object relationship, if it's still, there's an I and a nature, and there's I love nature, I hate nature, whatever, if there's that kind of grammatical construction, we're still working on kind of disintegrating those boundaries so that you can actually feel it. And like I said, it's not something you intellectually can understand.
Right.
The poems are really kind of like a creative reflection of the embodiment. So it's something that, tries to capture it. But what I do with people at the end is I say, okay, take your final poem. You've woven all this stuff for 8 weeks, and now I want you to do this thing called caching, which is something like squirrels do. They put things away for later. So I'll say, put this away for 6 months or a year or something, and then when you read it in a year, I don't want you to think about what it means. I want you to try to feel what it feels like to read it. And that's the thing to focus on. Not trying to capture it in an abstraction, not trying to say, oh, I get it. Because if you say you get it, I don't know if you get it. I mean, I can't explain it. I can't claim that I get it, but I feel it. Like, I know in my body when I am Earth. There's no way of giving it to people. Yeah. They just have to work through all those biases. I think for me, one of the things that is kind of interesting about my educational journey is that my master's degree was like an anti-bias degree. And I'm really passionate about working in anti-bias. One of my other pieces is like anti-bias in adultism, that I feel strongly that we have a society based on adult privilege, and that children are not seen as equal to adults. They're seen as inferior, not yet adults. And then there's this other piece about human privilege or ecological bias. That kind of sets you up for having a problematic relationship with the earth if you can't identify with it. So how do we just peel back those layers of separation until you eliminate that bias? You don't see the world through an anthropocentric lens anymore. You don't take things personally. Yeah. One of the things I do is I have scrolls for people to take out to a sit spot. And the first scroll is I say, without ego, there's no winning or losing. What would it feel like if you could live in that way? And that's kind of one of these things I think about constantly, because the ego is so driven by this urge to succeed. It's like life is about success. Life is about winning. Right. And if we're not winning, we're not worth it.
Right.
And it's like, what about if you didn't have any context for that? Like the trees. I see this in the trees so strongly, that they're not trying to win.
Yeah.
And they're not competing. Sometimes through an anthropocentric lens, you could say, well, they're competing for sunlight. They're trying to get the sunlight. But is it because they're all working together and it's not about who is going to get it?
Yeah.
It's just like, right now it's my turn. You're going to die right now, but in 1,000 years, you'll have your turn. And it's not this kind of spiteful, competitive, like I need to win, so you need to lose. Right. It's like sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. And when you look at it in that context, winning and losing aren't even real.
Right.
It's just, when is it my turn to have the sunlight?
And trees do, I think, I was reading a book about how in a community of trees, they will grow in such a way that allows each other to almost like, it almost optimizes the light for each other. Like they'll kind of get out of each other's way, you know, and it's sort of, it almost kind of like, it's cooperative.
Yes.
It feels very cooperative.
Yes, and we were talking about this earlier, that there's something horrific about identifying as nature, because I think the statistic is something like trees drop like, 300,000 seeds in their lifetime.
And like one or two or
statistically, one of them survives to become a tree.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what the parent trees do is they create a lot of shade on the forest floor. And so, like humans, we have this story about relationships between parents and children, where it's the parents who want to build up the child and make them really like successful and strong. And the parent trees actually, you could say in a way, they're starving their children. But what's actually happening is that they're forcing slow growth, because if a parent tree falls over and the baby tree gets all that sunlight, it grows very quickly, and then it has a very weak core.
Gotcha.
And so when the wind comes, that tree knocks over instantly. And so it's this weird thing of like, a parent is purposely depriving their child of nutrients so that they will grow up strong. And that's kind of like that thing about there's a beauty in the darkness, in the horror and monstrosity. And that's all just projections of our human, like our anthropocentric bias is like,
totally.
Oh, that's so horrible. Like, a parent should never do that. Well, if they don't do that, their children are going to die.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be kind?
Yeah.
Is it easily fit into a box? Like, no, not really.
Yeah, it reminds me of it's like a proverb or something I was reading about, where it's like if you see a butterfly emerging from a cocoon and you see how much it struggles, if you go to help it, you actually end up killing it, because it then won't be strong enough to fly.
Right.
If it doesn't have to break its own way through the cocoon.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you think about the planet as a butterfly, like, same principle.
Yeah.
Right? The more you try to fix it or help it, maybe it's got it all figured out. Like, we don't seem to have a lot of trust.
Yes, exactly.
That the natural process is indomitable and will, find a way. This is why I kind of mentioned this thing about, like, is environmentalism framed with anthropocentric bias? It's like, for me, obviously, like, I don't want to die, and I don't want these trees to die, and I don't want all species to go away. And clearly, like, I love all of these beings. They're my friends, and that would make me sad. But at this ultimate level of consciousness or reality, would it be okay? Yeah. That's the challenge. Like, that's the real gritty, sticky, shitty, challenging thing about being ecological.
Yeah.
Is it's like, how do we learn to love in such a way that we can also let go?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what a lot of spiritual practice is really trying to describe. Like,
Right.
for me, I find nature is teaching us that even if you're, doing whatever, like, no matter what your cultural ideas or religious ideas or whatever, like, the whole system is set up in such a way that it's trying to teach us how to let go and how to love unconditionally. And that doesn't preclude things like violence and collapse and devastation. Like, it's such a challenging thing to come to terms with, that joy and suffering are inextricably bound to each other. When I teach about this and like using a Taoist framework, you know, there's that yin yang, that polar opposites are connected and, you know, contained within each other. So I tell people, you know, if you've had a child, how did it feel when you had your child? And people will say, it felt amazing. It was like one of the best moments of my life. I say, okay, so how can you imagine it will feel when your child dies? And they'll say, well, that's going to be the opposite. It's going to be the worst feeling. I say, so do you understand that the moment you had the child, you created the precondition for that suffering? If you hadn't had the child, you wouldn't have had the joy. But if you didn't have the joy, you wouldn't have created the precondition for the suffering. Same thing with getting a check in the mail, right? Your boss sends you a check and you say, yes, I have $100 now. And you've also created the precondition for losing your $100 when you pay your electric bill, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. You can't have one without the other. So our rejection of suffering is really problematic because it's part of that drive to separate ourselves, to say like there can be a world in which it's perfect, a utopian world. And I mean, I love in The Matrix where Neo meets the architect and he asks the architect, why did you create a matrix with suffering? Why would you do that? And the architect says, well, we tried making a matrix where there was no suffering, but all the humans died because they couldn't fit that in their consciousness. Like they went insane and they all died. And it's like, that's because the matrix is a machine world. It's a contrived, abstracted reality. But what we are is not a machine. We are nature. So we're operating under the same rules. We're part of the Tao, right? We're governed by the same thing, but we resist it. And all of our efforts to resist it come in the form of separation, to say, this is not me. Yeah. This is not what I am. I can do something different. I can get out of this system. I can transcend it. I can earn immortality somehow. There's all these things we do. And I guess part of what I'm talking about with forest bathing, even though this isn't really what I'm expecting people to get out of it, what I'm hoping people will get out of it is really just to relax. Like, we're talking about a lot of deep end stuff right now, but I mean, for people listening to this podcast, the book isn't about any of this really. It's about what does it feel like to just stop?
Yeah. What
is it like to just relax? And then when you start relaxing, then you start feeling. And when you start feeling, then you start remembering. And when you remember, then maybe all of this anxiety kind of goes away. We have a lot of eco grief and eco anxiety on top of all of our human stress, right? There's a lot of this tension around like, the world is really bad. Like, it's all going to hell. We're all going to die. And it's like, yes, and it's also incredibly beautiful. There's all of these things happening all around you all the time. And it's interesting how, like, just grounding yourself is the most trauma-informed practice I think I've ever encountered. That I met this woman who does eco-psychology, and she said, yeah, it's amazing that you do this stuff outside because there's no more trauma-informed place than nature because it's a rich sensory environment. So if people start to have a problem, you can just say, you know, what can you feel right now? What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? And it brings you back to the body. So all of that rumination, that mental anxiety and stress, that kind of evaporates when we just come back to being what we are. Because we spend most of our time freaking out all the time, right? And like, I mean, we can go into the deep end and say it's about a fear of death or impermanence. But there's also very real stresses. You know, it's stressful having a family. It's stressful having a job. It's stressful just being alive. Sometimes, you know, bills, gotta fill up the tank of gas and whatever. There's just a million things all the time. That's kind of the nature of our society, is we keep going faster and faster and faster. We're striving. We're trying to be better. There's a culture of self-improvement. Doesn't let you rest. I think I wrote about this in this piece about health, which forest bathing is really healthy for you. It doesn't need to be a spiritual journey at all.
Right.
I know there's tons of people that don't think of it as a spiritual journey, and I think that's fabulous. Like, it doesn't need to be spiritual at all. It can be very simple and just oriented around being healthy and happy. But yeah, we're evolved to be outside, and we're evolved to slow down and rest. We need rest. It's absolutely essential. And so I live in LA, right? And you lived in LA, so you know this. But, there's all these people who are like, I drink wheatgrass every day, and I go to the gym 5 times a week, and I do Reiki, and I do this and that. I do all the things. And it's like, but do you rest?
Yes, exactly.
Do you actually give yourself a break? Because the body can't heal. It doesn't matter what you're eating. It doesn't matter how much you're exercising. Like, resting is absolutely integral to our health. Yeah. That's where a lot of people are like, so forest bathing, the healing benefits are about like the phytoncides, these chemicals that come from the trees and the impact on the human immune system. That's all happening, but you can get those if you go hiking, right? Yeah. Like, just going outside, that's all you need. The thing about forest bathing that's kind of the revolutionary thing, and of course, revolutionary is a little bit of a funny word because it's old wisdom. It's old medicine is recognized as new medicine finally. Sometimes science needs to back it up for people to think it's real. Yeah. But it's like, it's about the combination of being outside and just resting. And those two things combined have a really powerful healing impact on the human body, which is, of course, what you are. So when we talk about this thing about healing, I think people often contextualize healing through the ego story of, well, who am I and how am I wounded? And what I'm talking about, that's not to say that that's not real. That's absolutely real. People need therapy. People need these kind of things. And then there's this other side of it where it's like, but if your body isn't healthy, how is anything sustainable? Like, it's not a vehicle that your consciousness is driving around.
Right.
It's actually you.
I wish we could talk for like
I
10 more
know.
hours.
We're just getting started.
I know, they're so awesome. This is our second one, but like, holy shit. Thank you. I cannot say thank you enough. This is like, I love that this is happening for me personally after this big psilocybin trip, because so much of what I received yesterday, I feel like having you here and talking about all this stuff was just like almost a continuation of extracting those truths out, or that wisdom out.
Mushrooms are earth too.
We're
all saying the same thing.
We are mushrooms. How can people get your book? And when's it coming out?
It comes out on June 29th.
Okay.
So very soon. And you can get it at the Simon & Schuster website or on Amazon. But I'd encourage people to visit my website, which is www.integralforestbathing.com. And on my website, you'll find lots of cool things. If you join the mailing list, I send you a PDF of a children's book for adults that I wrote called The Wild Garden, which is illustrated by my friend Tay Arrow, and it's really fabulous. There's a series of audio meditations that I use in my course that are free for anyone that wants to check them out. There's the course, there's the forest therapy training, and there's a link to where you can buy the book. So lots of good stuff on there.
Awesome.
This was so amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Such an honor.
We're having you back 1,000 more times.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like there's still a lot of material we need to cover.
I know.
We just got started.
Music for Wu Nu is composed by Adam Miller.